A little introduction about Ruth. Borgenicht's undergraduate degree at Rutgers University was in math. Love of math was not enough to invent new ideas in this field. She says, unfortunately for her, that it also required genius. The discovery that she could be far more creative with clay than with math came under the last year of undergraduate schooling. Flash forward 25 years to when her MFA was launched, where she launched a new direction of socially engaged and participatory projects. Borgenicht has said participatory processes have opened up a broader context for both her role as an artist and her creative expression. Known for her work with ceramics, much of her ceramic knowledge comes from other artists, books, and the many residencies that have provided a supportive and well-equipped environment. Residencies have included Hunter College in New York City, the Anderson Ranch in Colorado, Greenwich House Pottery in New York City, Watershed Center for Ceramic Arts in Maine, Chester Springs Studio in Pennsylvania, and University of the Arts in PA. She's taught workshops and been a visiting artist in many schools and currently teaches at Montclair University and Rockland County Community College. Is that also part of Suffern? Or, the Art School of Old Church, Demarest, New Jersey. She has been in residence here at William Paterson, and today she gives her time to give us a lecture. Thanks, Ruth.
Thanks, Michael. Hey, guys. Do you guys want to find a seat somewhere? It's a little crowded. You could sit, I don't know. You want to sit? Come on, come in the front. You can sit down there. Wow. So, Michael, do we have lights? Is this what this is?
I think we turn these off. Right?
Are those on? We could leave one light on.
And then, is that okay?
Yeah, that works. That works for you guys, right? All right, let's see if we can get this to play. All right, awesome. All right, so I started doing ceramics, actually my last year at Rutgers University, where I was a math major, and just fell in love with it. And I've been working for a couple of decades of working with clay and interweaving cast rings, ceramic rings. So, whoops, this is actually a movable piece. I brought a little sample. I'm going to pass it around. You guys can feel this. Let's start with you guys down here. I'll pass that around. So my pieces always had a haptic quality. Haptic means a tactile quality. And they would move and fluctuate. And you can see here that there are different sized rings, which creates this undulations off the wall. And I would color the clay itself. Using kind of traditional themes, like that other one was a landscape. Some landscapes, some trees. And all these pieces move. So for example, this one, you could push it and it would lean over a little bit. And they all had this sound quality. You guys who are passing the little chainmail piece around has a sound component. Returned to school to get an MFA and things changed radically. I became interested in food culture and communal eating. And you know, when you deal with food, it taps in a whole reservoir of history and culture, politics, traditions. And this was about the time when visitors from mostly Muslim countries were banned. And I felt like I needed to do something. And of course, I did it through food, which was at the time what I was pretty passionate about. So I made 24 Syrian sesame cookies, a traditional recipe, and I put them up on eBay. So it turns out you can sell cookies on eBay. Google chocolate chip cookies, Google ginger cookies, Google any kind of cookies. Who knew? And they're mostly by, you know, isolated housewives in the Midwest that have these great family recipes, and they're selling cookies in the middle of nowhere. And that's the amazing thing about eBay. So I put on these Syrian sesame cookies. I said they were made by a real New Jersey suburban housewife, and all proceeds go to ACLU. Had a dozen or so bids, sold to someone in New York City, got the money and donated to ACLU. So that was my way through food to get a little bit, you know, to have a little bit of a response. ACLU, by the way, is American Civil Liberties Union. Other things with food that it taps into is the social engagement that people have around food. You guys eat together often in family units. Marshmallows. Real traditional American. So I went from Syrian recipe, Syrian whatever, the sesame cookies, to marshmallows. And to make this a communal experience, I cast marshmallows, which are basically sugar and gelatin, whipped molten sugar and gelatin, into a form, and created a stick framework for it. So it's set up on a pedestal. You can come and eat it. And of course, what do you do with marshmallows? You roast them over a fire. I used a torch to caramelize. It's amazing caramelization, the smell of that. You could smell it in all the classrooms. I did this at school. And people could come and take bites of it. Now, of course, that brings up sanitary issues, because who wants to take a bite out of a marshmallow where someone else has eaten? But after someone took a bite, I would take the torch, and that would both sterilize and caramelize the spot where they ate from. So figuring out sort of ways to make this work brought up all kinds of issues of hygiene and sharing. I also started bringing my work down to the ground. This idea of food being related to a sense of place and how to really connect it to where you are standing. And I started serving kinds of food that were locally foraged. In this case, this is Japanese knotweed. It's considered an invasive in this area. Actually, it's all over the place. It's quite edible. Now, we haven't developed a taste for it here, but in Japan it's eaten. It's not unlike, you see how it's kind of segmented like bamboo? And when it's very young, in the spring, you can take the shoots. Now, the leaves are poisonous, you don't eat those, but you take the shoots, you can cook them. Do you guys want to come in? Maybe you want to sit down, maybe in the front somewhere? Sneak in. So you can cook them. I pickled them. These are pickled in order to preserve them. Pickling is a way of preserving food, so I pickled them and served them pickled. And just what I did here is I took a public area, removed the bricks, and replaced them with my own bricks. And these are bricks that I had glazed. For you guys who are clay people, I know there are a bunch of clay people here. Remember, bricks are terracotta. It's kind of clay. So I made a nice lace doily, like we were having a picnic. Actually dipped a lace doily in glaze, laid it over the bricks, and then fired the bricks. So that white glaze is fired on, and then embedded that into a patio to serve a picnic of foraged foods. All right, got a question. How many water bottles are in this room? And I'll bring this back around. I have one. Michael, thank you. You brought me one. Raise them up. Let me see how many are there. Yeah, we carry our own water bottles. Some are disposable, some are not. But I'm going to say the majority of people have some kind of drinking vessel on us. And I'll tie this back in. So which is better, disposable bottles or reusable bottles? Reusable. Duh, right. You guys are in college. It's an easy question. But you know, I'm not sure that's the actual question. And maybe that's the wrong question we're asking. What's a better question to ask? Yeah.
Are you reusing your bottles?
Are you reusing your bottles? Other question?
Drink water at all.
Do you drink water at all? Okay.
There's someone down there.
Someone down here? What's that?
Is it, or which one is more harmful to the environment?
Okay, from an environmental perspective? Yeah, it's not a trick question. I'm asking honestly, yeah.
What's the quality of the water?
The quality of water you have in your water bottle. Right, because this coming from my faucet is going to be different from this which is coming from elsewhere. Other questions that come up? Yeah.
Is it recyclable?
Is it recyclable? Yeah. I'm kind of getting at I want a bigger question, a bigger issue. That this question, yeah. Hold on, what's that?
How much water
How much water?
are you using?
Right, because you can measure it. This is quantifiable. Yes. What shape?
How to eliminate the not reusable bottle.
Okay, so how to
stop using
that and use this? You guys, for millennia, humans did not have water bottles. What the hell did they use?
Animal bladders.
Or they'd go down to the river, or even more recently, they have these things called water fountains. I don't know if you guys have them here, right? Yeah. So I mean, I think what's a more interesting question is why do we need water bottles at all? I don't know. I feel like this is a baby bottle, like I'm nursing on it all day or something. I feel somehow. So this whole thing is a sham that you guys need to be having water bottles at all, because if we have good water sources, you all have bathrooms and sinks and water fountains in most places. Yes, correct me. Okay, going down to the river is not quite something how we live anymore. All right, so we'll go with that. Let's keep going. All right.
Not everyone like the taste of the water fountain not much.
That's true because it's chlorinated often. Yeah. But let's say if we didn't have water bottles, this individualized sort of water bottle, if we didn't have water bottles and we all depended on the water fountain, wouldn't the quality, that would be a shared interest for us to ensure that the quality of the water is good. We would all have to use the same water. But now I can buy a fancy water from Indonesia, or deal with my own little filtered bottled water, filtered in my kitchen. I have a little filter underneath the sink. Okay. Then, all right, so here's your classic water fountain. This was on campus at Montclair State University. And I went there, and it had this sign, helped eliminate waste from 15,451 disposable plastic bottles. So my act of going to the fountain meant that I was eliminating water bottles from being disposed of in, big waste areas, from going into the ocean. But, I thought about it, and the more I thought about it, I'm like, no, that's not why I'm going to the water fountain. I'm not going down to the water fountain to avoid buying a water bottle. I'm going to the water fountain because I'm thirsty. Yeah, kind of a novel idea. So I thought that was interesting that it's been so entrenched, this concept of water to be served in these individualized amounts, that even just going to get water, it has to remind me that I'm saving bottles. This is now a unit of water. Okay, so what does this mean? These unit of waters really, I think, reflect how our culture is. And on a big picture, we've individualized the experience of drinking water, right? We no longer go to the water fountain. What else has it changed? What does this allow us to do? Yeah. Portable takes it with you, exactly. Yep. We're a mobile culture, right? I brought this in the car, brought it with me, I carry it around with me. Excellent, yeah. And what it also reflects is consumption. We buy it, right? We don't go to the water fountain, but we buy a bottle. And that's, again, so entrenched in our way of thinking of water that even just drinking water is equated with consuming water bottles. All right. And I think what happens is the larger picture is obscured about having fresh water and available. And we call this a false equivalency. Drinking from the fountain means not buying a water bottle. It's a false equivalency. It's not equivalent. Those two things are not the same thing, and obscures the issue that we really aren't providing enough fresh water for everyone. All right. Let's keep going. So the bottle reflects, it individualizes the drinking experience. It's mobile. When you have consumption, then you also have to deal with the fact that these are disposable. And this might sound strange, but sometimes it helps in your art practice to figure out what you're not. And I decided my art practice is not a water bottle, all right? Which means it's the opposite of that, which means it's more communal or shared experience. It wants to create a sense of place, or it's immovable. And lastly, it's not disposable, okay? Just as a framework for how I work. Here I am cooking some foraged mushrooms as one of my pieces. For you guys who collect, I know there's a couple of foragers in here. That's my taki up there, and here this is some chicken of the woods. Oh, maybe that's just more of my takis, whatever. So I often serve food at some of my installations and interactive works. Here's a piece from Montclair Design Week. It was an event, this was last year, 2018, and I installed a brick patio. You all saw before that I work with bricks. These are forged bricks that I've just collected around town. And I served food, well, I made this large brick area, kind of a brick patio, served food by, I made some hollow terracotta bricks, hollow which became baking pans, and I baked bread right in there, and then I could drop them into the patio. Those are some dandelion leaves on the right that are just pickling. Well, those aren't foraged the grapes, but they did come out of I foraged them from my fridge. Do you see these white areas? So these glazed white areas became, in a sense, plates, but they were attached to the bricks on the ground. You couldn't pass them around like you would normally do in a restaurant, right? You had to come to it, and it encouraged circulation amongst the various foods, because you had to go to the food couldn't come to you. So kind of switching the master-slave dynamic in a way. And also speaks to hygiene. You know, the standard white plate, IKEA, right? Universal. Everyone who sees a white plate knows what it is. We've all encountered them. There were some foraged foods and plants in there. Here are some more maitakes right up against that column. And people would walk around, and what was interesting about it is it created a social dynamic. By inviting people to eat off the floor, we kind of threw out all those traditional norms we have around eating, of which there are so many of, how to sit, how to eat, what utensils to eat with. This people ate directly with their hands. And it created an environment where people were sharing and talking, and it was just a kind of a communal experience that really connected people to each other, and ideally to the place was the thing. These are, by the way, foraged hickory nuts, and I had an installation like this actually here at Ben Shahn Galleries. I don't know if any of you saw it. Yeah, a couple of you did. So I've done iterations of this with different fruits, and kind of depends what's available. And these were hickory nuts that you could break with a hickory nuts are native to the United States. You could break with, they're hard as hell. You can break them with a hammer or a rock. They're a lot harder to extricate the meat from than walnuts. So they take a lot more effort. All right, I want to talk a little bit about the cultural roots, meaning the roots of culture that's in my work. All right, defining features of culture. This is just kind of a big overview. Defining features, there are 5 main defining features. Culture is learned. This isn't rocket science. This is all sort of things you've thought about. Culture is shared. Oh, misspelling. Oops. Culture is transmitted. So it's shared and transmitted in various ways from generation to generation. It's cumulative, so it's built upon. And it's human. Right? We don't talk about deer culture. Right? Other kinds of culture. Yeah. And there are 2, well, it's hard to say when culture really began. I mean, for 2 primary reasons. The first is there's very little material evidence because it was handed down. Second, most of culture is non-material when we think about it. So one is tangible artifacts and one is intangible artifacts. Let's go back to the water bottle. Tangible artifacts would be the water bottle. Intangible things would be the values and norms that go along with that. That's how culture is manifested, right? The values and norms that go along with the water bottle as an example. Those would be, let's see. All right, we are the culture of the water bottle, okay. The values and norms that go along with it, as mentioned before, would be to individualize it, mobility, and the consumption disposability, which, these are all sort of entwined. So really, if we had to define ourselves and what kind of culture we're living right now, we, meaning here in New Jersey at William Paterson, is enough of you guys have a water bottle to say that this is a trend, this is a cultural trend, right? Did you guys know that? You guys are living the water bottle culture. Yes. All right. There's another kind of culture I'm going to talk about. And this one, I had a residency at the New Jersey Center for Visual Arts, which is in Summit. And I wanted to tie different kinds of culture. Culture, as written up there, is the kind of culture that happens in an art center, right? Y'all can imagine what kind of culture that is. Poetry readings, arts, the gallery out here at the Benchon Gallery, and the kind of culture that happens here in the kitchen. All right, so now I'm talking about a completely different kind of culture. That's a visual art center, that's a kitchen. So I turned my space, I turned the gallery into a kitchen where I started doing research on the origins of agriculture. There's that word. Why is the word culture part of agriculture? Anyone want to take a flying guess on that?
Because there are also like traditions, how you manage certain things. Let's say, I mean, if someone has a farm, let's say, obviously there are certain stuff that you do with like animals and stuff like that, and then you kind of go around and then you spend your day a certain way, and you show, let's say, sometimes others how to spend your day when you have like agricultural business, let's say.
Okay, so when we all lived like agrarian lives and we all had farms,
That's it.
that became embedded in our culture. Anyone have an example or want to take a guess how those two could relate? The culture when we talk about the arts and then the culture when we talk about food? Take a guess, yeah?
Just the way we practice making our food and creating it.
Yeah, so food becomes really integrated in all culture, yeah?
It's like when we grow our food and the parents show the children, and as they grow up, they do the same thing on. And with art, say an artist inspires students, and the students decide that what they saw is something they want to pursue, and like a similar type of style. So they not only take up the style that they saw and liked, but they turn it into their own little way. So like switches and grows how they.
So the passing on traditions of generation to generation. Yeah. Yeah, and those are true in both things. Agriculture and culture, they're cyclical in nature. They're seasonal. They come back around, right? I mean, I told my kids that they're not allowed to be artists, actually. So it didn't quite work in my case. But, all right. So at some point, they meant the same thing. Agriculture, that means growing foods. And our culture, like our traditions and our arts, were the same. Somewhere along the line, they bifurcated, and they became two different concepts. Okay, the arts and then food. All right, let's see, where am I at? All right, oh, here's proof. Here's an old book on canning and preserving and making pickles. And you see it's called the Culture Book. That use of the word culture in this case has to do with agriculture. And you guys, it's embedded in our language that these meant the same. Have you guys ever heard of the word culture in other kinds of foods besides agriculture? Shoot.
Like fermented foods.
Absolutely. Bingo. Yeah, fermented foods, cultured foods. How do we preserve milk?
Fermenting. I mean, also fermenting.
We culture the milk. We introduce bacteria, and it turns it into yogurt, or cultured milk, and it preserves it. Yeah. So we're starting seeing all these kind of vocabulary words that are, you know, it kind of means the same thing. And okay, so back to the Summit Art Center. I got all these vegetables at the Summit Farmers Market and brought them into the gallery. And I got a bunch of books on fermenting foods and foraging foods, and made a whole bunch of fermented foods by introducing, you know, so the farmers market actually is a form of culture that Summit has. I mean, people come there to do all kinds of cultural things besides just buy food. There's usually some nonprofits represented, there's kids' activities. Brought the food back to the Summit Art Center to try to combine these different meanings of culture. The Art Center, and then culture meaning to preserve or ferment. Fermented a bunch of foods by using lactofermentations, which uses the kind of local bacteria that's just in the environment, in this case the gallery, to ferment the foods. And then, oh, here we go. So these are fermented foods. These are lactofermented, just taking the bacteria from the air, and they're in a salt water, and the salt inhibits other bad bacteria from growing. But it preserves them. And these are various vegetables. And then I went back and tried to really get the history of this definition of culture and what it meant. And interesting enough, the first definition when you look up of culture is cultivation and fermentation. It's not the arts. It's cultivation and fermentation, and why that means the same thing as cultivation is growing. Why do we need to ferment things? Because it needs to get preserved. Because when something's in season and you harvest it, you've got a bucket load of it, and before there was refrigeration or you can go down to ShopRite and buy something, you had to figure out a way to preserve it. You could either pickle it, you could dry it, you could candy it. There are a number of ways that you could. So cultivation and fermentation is the first definition of culture. The second definition is the one that we all know, which is the visual arts, literature, and music. And then the third is, this is our cyclical transference, right, where you're talking about transferring traditions, cyclical pattern of transferring human knowledge, so passing it down. All right, so where am I next? All right, so after I fermented all these vegetables for a week or two at Summit Art Center, I returned them back to the farmer's market and got a stand there, and then reintroduced the vegetables now, but with some local culture or local bacteria. And people were welcome to come and try the various foods that had been fermented. So I kind of returning these and combining those different combinations, different definitions of culture, that of the arts and that of bacteria and fermenting and preserving. That was a fun project. All right, shifting gears for a second. There's a long history of embedded in design is ways of being socially interactive when eating. Okay, this is called a kylex. This is way back from Greek times, right? It was a drinking vessel, and it's a very shallow drinking vessel. So you can imagine at these big drinking festive parties, the more drunk you got, the harder it was to pass this around because it was really shallow. It took a couple people to hold it and get it to you. And then usually there was some kind of risque scene of some sort in the middle. So as the wine level went down, it would reveal some image. And these were communally shared. Everyone would drink from the same drinking vessel. So I made my own version of that. These flanges or wings are far enough apart so that the person drinking can't hold it themselves. So in order to drink, you had to find a couple of other people to help maneuver this large vessel, and then I had the shallow bowl on top. And it was kind of heavy, too. Okay. Historically, drinking and eating has always been the norm. And again, you can see that in the design of things. This is an English earthenware drinking cup from 17th and 18th centuries. And you can find these examples around the world. The other one was Greek, this one's English. I think I have another one, Native American wedding vase. You would drink out of both halves. The couple who was getting married. I'm sorry I don't have which tribe this is from. But they manifest in various forms. Namibia? I mean, this is a universal concept. This is around the world. And here we also have, just to note that these guys are made out of clay. So clay is a very historic, universal material, and you can trace anthropological history, the human history, through all the artifacts that are made out of clay. And there's that word artifacts, because that is our culture. That's a tangible bit of culture that remains. How it was used historically, we don't know exactly, but we can guess. Okay, this was an article at some point. Alone Together, the return of communal restaurant tables became a thing, I don't know, 10, 20 years ago in the city to create communal tables where everybody could sit at. But what they really figured out was, as more establishments seat people in close proximity, friendships are not forged. What they figured out is that the communal tables only work when you have a social lubricant. It wasn't enough just to seat people together. One of the advantages of seating people together in New York City was safe space. Yeah, exactly. I mean, but the idea of you sitting across from someone and starting a conversation didn't quite happen. So you needed some kind of thing at the table. So I did a number of dinners. This was in Montclair as a benefit, actually for Montclair State. And I made these communal eating utensils. And they're essentially two bowls that are connected. And this was like I don't know why there's French fries on the, what are those called, oysters? Or are those things called oysters? Mussels. Okay, on mussels. And then there was a broth underneath it. So after you used your hands to eat your French fries and the mussels, you would then drink. But obviously, because these two things are connected, exactly. Because if you drink out of one and you just pour all the broth on the other, they will get upset. So you had to pair off with people. This was the social lubricant idea. You became interdependent at the table with other people. Also, for one of the meals, or I should say one of the dishes, everyone was connected via their wrists. You had to put your wrists through a hole, and then these are those elastic exercise thingies, tubes, right? So that if with everyone's wrists connected, you had to. The holes were not placed evenly apart, so you had to figure out which hole fit your wrist, and sometimes you had a hand here and this one was over here, depending who was sitting with you. But if you moved, then you kind of pulled and dragged everyone with you. So everyone, but they were elasticized, so everybody's hands were wiggling around. It was quite funny, but to figure out how to eat like that, and again, no utensils. These were slices of like bruschetta or pizza or something that was on the table. So you create challenges. A food twister. Oh, I like that. Yeah, exactly. A food twister. And the idea of discovery at the table. So I made these double-ended cups. Again, they're clay. Double-ended cups. Up there, there's bread on one end, and I think the bottom was butter on the bottom. But here I did it in collaboration. This was at Halcyon. This is a nice restaurant in Montclair, and I worked with the chef on a menu. And what she did is she baked like a chocolate bread pudding or chocolate brownies or something in them. And then once they cooled, turned them upside down. And then on the top, I think served ice cream with mint. Some had cookies in them, but they were all different. So once they were served to the table, you know, we said there was something hidden in there, and people were kind of looking inside, looking for them. Eventually, you know, someone figures it out by turning it upside down and say, oh, I've got bread pudding. What do you have? Oh, I have brownies. So the idea of having consistent food also is a way to change things. If everyone has a different item on the menu. Have you ever gone out to dinner and with friends or family and everyone had to order something different so you could try something? Yeah. All right. That's the idea. So everyone had something different, and they ended up sharing just so you could get a taste of all the different things and being able to discover what was hidden in there. Eating and abetting. This was another dinner or luncheon. It was at a conference at NYU. Interesting, the conference was urban placemaking and social practice, so it kind of fit in there. These cups, you can see they're all connected, and those are just plastic cups. These I'm reusing are double bowls again, the ceramic bowls. They had to pair off, and in this case, not only did you have to find a partner, but one of the people had to come and get the soup. So again, we didn't serve the food, but everyone had to get up and come get the food. Again, changing that sort of master-slave dynamic so that people are physically engaged with getting the food. I mean, it's a really small thing, like to go up and go to the buffet, but now you had to figure out what you wanted and what your partner wanted because there was a variety of soups to select from. And it just creates a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more interaction at the luncheon. All right, we're moving forward. I have these guys, these are part of the dinner. Spices and things that you could add to the soup, whether it was salt or scallions or dill or something, were placed in these little ceramic plates, which we handed off to people. So I had some volunteers who came, and they had to be, could I use your hand as an example? The idea was not to tell people how to behave, but to show. Show, don't tell. So they were handed off, and they were very tactile. So you would grab the person's hand and do this. These were my servers. With the idea that you, when you were passing the spices around, would go to the next person and take their hand and put it on. Because these bowl shapes didn't have any bottoms. They kind of rocked. So they cradled and they made sense to pass around hand to hand. And so that tactile quality of clay and passing food around, I've always been involved with. You guys, the little chain piece that's passing around, is that making its way somewhere?
Yes.
Did it go around? Yeah. Did you guys feel that in the back?
We didn't get it in this room.
You didn't? All right. Would you guys just pass that back? Yeah. So there's the tactile quality continues because when we touch things, not just make contact and touch each other, it creates empathy. Empathy for the piece, empathy for each other. So I try to include ways of when we're interacting either with food or in other engaged ways with my projects, ways where people can touch.
Not on the phone.
Not on your phone, right. Touch.
Not only phone.
Not only the phone, where you're touching things. In some case, again, you may be touching each other. And I have actually, oops. I'll pass these around. These are a couple of rock cups. I did a project this fall, again with Montclair Design Week. Montclair is in New Jersey. I live close to there. I'm involved with that. But we did a foraged feast there where we tried to locally source as much food as possible. But I made these ceramic cups, and they have a tactile, you guys can just pass them around, tactile quality. You guys notice that they don't really have a bottom, so they kind of sit off kilter. Well, this one sits a little bit balanced. With the idea is you can't really place them down. So if you're drinking out of them, you have to hold them and you have to drink everything. So you can't be drinking, also cruising Facebook and kind of half doing your homework at the same time. You can be drinking out of them, but that's all you're doing. So through the design of this, in a way, I'm sort of encouraging people to interact and just do one thing. I mean, we're so used to multitasking. You want to pass it around? Yeah. So it's a tactile. You guys can feel that. All right, keep going. Oh, this was something else. All right, I'll get back to the Montclair Design Week. This was surplus. I'm a bit of a scavenger. These were 18-inch square surplus tiles from a construction place. Tiles, you guys, are made out of clay, right, and glaze. So then I also went to the Goodwill and bought all these white plates and fused them to the tiles by using glaze in the kiln. And this also was at the Ben Shahn Galleries, so I know a couple of you guys saw it. And this was on the floor, installed on the floor, and it can have various configurations. People are uncomfortable eating off the floor, because of all this hygiene issue. So I tried to remedy that by using white plates. I only got the white plates at the Goodwill store, at various Goodwill stores. And they are glazed down by using some toxic looking glazes, but they did the job. And then I served primarily white food, neutral colored food, bland food, processed food, eggs, crackers, anything, popcorn, marshmallows up there. Those are homemade marshmallows, the square ones. You guys can make marshmallows, recipes online. And all right, so that's an example of how I bring my food down to the floor. All right, this is Montclair Design Week 2019. Scavenge bricks, construction surplus. I drove by this construction site and they let me go into the debris pile and grab segments of bricks. Some were broken, a lot were cut because they were building a wall, cut sections. I glazed them, bright colors, which kind of made a nice hygienic surface. We ultimately use them as plates. Here's an example which just shows some foraged foods. That's chicken of the woods. That's a type of fungus. That's poor man's pepper. And, black velvet bolete. Gorgeous. We also made plates with community volunteers for the dinner by taking impressions off the street. So we went out on the street with slabs of clay, pulled them off of cracks, off utility covers. So with the idea that we were eating off the street, although of course these are fired to 2,000 degrees and they're sterile, the plates ultimately. A lot of forage foods, because again we wanted to source everything locally, not just the plates, meaning the bricks, and the impressions or the texture on them. This is a wood ear mushroom. foraged a couple bags of these, and they got served up. And we had a couple of volunteer chefs from local restaurants that also helped out and worked up. Those are the cups, by the way. They were a real bitch to fill, though, because we had all this alcohol that was donated, and you see when they're on the table, they don't really, most of them don't stand upright. So we had to put them upright, fill them, and hand them off. But again, it created that kind of, handoff of passing them around. But royal pain in the butt to do at a dinner. Here was the event. This is pretty much just about done. We had 55 guests. 55 people as a fundraiser. A local party designer foraged all the branches and all the plants. She put word out to get all the hydrangea flowers. They were dried because it was in the fall, and they were all almost dried, not quite, and created this whole environment. A local woodworker, or actually a tree cutter, created all these planks from trees he cut down in town, and he brought limbs. And then it started with a performance artist named Madeline Schwartzman, who teaches at Parsons. She does a lot of interactive things with plants where people would have to take branches in this case. So the event started with people engaging and interacting with each other through branches. So we'd grab a branch, there was a wasp nest, there was mushrooms, there were all kinds of things on the table, organic matter. And it's the idea to reconnect with nature, and they had to communicate or somehow, she had all these sets of instructions, somehow relate to each other. So that started the whole kind of ethos of the evening of sharing. So that was my most recent project. That was this fall with the Forage Feast. And funny enough, I've got my chain things that I showed you from the beginning. I actually have a show of those in Miami as part of an art fair in December. So I'm still toggling between my older work and my newer work. But this work that's out there, the socially engaged work, I find has a little bit more relevance to how we're living today. And I'm not just putting work up there to sell to those people who can afford it. So it has a little more meaning. I think that's another image from the event. You can see the tables are just covered with all kinds of found materials. But it really took a whole team of people to put this together. And I think that's where I'm going, is collaborating with other people to create events like this. So that's it. Thank you. Do you guys have to go? Anybody have a few questions that you want to ask? Yeah.
Here, hold on, please.
Oh, we have a mic, yeah. It's okay.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Does it work? Okay. Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Brene Brown, but she's kind of like a social researcher, and she does a lot of stuff on social engagement and wholeheartedness and what it really means to live a happy, wholehearted life. And I like that your work kind of like mirrors what she's trying to teach, is that the reason that people in modern day have become so like separated and
They become water bottles, yes.
yeah. And she teaches that the way to really live a happier life and more fulfilling life is through engagement with people and actually connecting with people. And I think that's like basically what your artwork or what you're doing too, is like telling people to engage and through physical touch and talking and, you know, like actual human to human communication. So that's what I got from
What's her name again?
Adelise.
Adelise?
Yeah, Altabar.
Altabar. Okay, I'll look her up. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Oh, there's just Dana.
Hi, going back to like your agriculture section, do you have any specific like personal connection to like agricultural centers of America or like family context to your work in that region?
Yes and no. I grew up kind of feral on a farm in Northwest Jersey. And Northwest Jersey, you guys know, the farmland is disappearing quickly. but my parents weren't farmers. It was leased land, but you know, I had a sense of that. I also grew up when I was younger in Israel a little bit. Now, I did not grow up on a farm in Israel, but in a very small town and a very working class town. So nobody had a lot of money, so we shared everything. Oh, do you want to turn that off? Oh, sorry. You don't want everyone to know your schedule, Michael? So you live in a small town and nobody has a lot of money, but you know what? Someone has a ladder. Someone has a chainsaw. You know what? Someone has some extra eggs from the chickens. So we were always sharing things. We didn't even think it was out of necessity. It was just you had something and someone else had something needed. So that idea of this entangled and collective way of living was somewhat familiar to me, and it's very different how we live now. We're wealthy enough where we can buy our own water bottles. You know, I don't need to come over and borrow water from you. So, fair enough. Yeah, thanks. Other questions?
You do, because it goes under the video.
All right, so I don't know if, like, from your perspective, do you think, like, as a society, do you think there's a need for us to kind of regress to more, like, fundamental things, like the social engagement? Or is it that we're just kind of evolving and this is just part of our process?
We're becoming more and more individualized? Yeah. I mean, I have my news delivered to my phone. It's individualized for me. Like, I can eliminate things I don't want to read about. We are progressing to become more and more individualized, and I think at a great cost.
And now, so you don't think it's a positive thing? You think we should try to go back
I
to
think
the
it's a
fundamentals?
trade-off, and we should be aware of it. I definitely don't want to introduce this concept of nostalgia, like back in the good old days, you know, when we had to go pump water out back. No, you know, I'm not going that, because you can't go backwards. You can only be where you're at and move forward. So trying to acknowledge that in my work, and then figuring out small ways to incorporate that is my challenge. Yeah. You know, or I could just sit here and just bemoan at how everything's just going to shit, you know, but that's not helpful. And there's a powerlessness that becomes ingrained in our way of thinking. And if we're powerless, then we're not going to become involved in social ways, but also political ways. We don't think our leaders are representing us. And there's a whole bigger picture, you know, if you start thinking that way. So we all do what we can. And as an artist, what agency does your artwork have to get out there, to affect, to influence? Yeah. Are you an art student?
Well, minor.
A minor,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I think most of you guys are in the art realm. And I think that's a question artists are really asking themselves. Yeah. You guys, I think we have time for one more question. Is there anybody have one? You want to ask another? Okay.
So I was just gonna ask. So would you say that your work, kind of through, since you were talking about tangible and intangible, through your work, it's more like through tangible artifacts and part of the culture, you're kind of like bringing more awareness to the intangible, which is the human connection part of it.
Yes,
so it's kind of
both.
like encouraging, yeah.
Yes, you have the physical artifact and then the less tangible, which is sort of the values and the norms.
Yeah.
And that's how culture manifests, through both those ways. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I kind of got from, like he was saying, that you're trying to like to bring back the good old days, but you're not really bringing it back. You're more bringing back the concepts and because we used to have more human connection back in the day. Because like you said, things were more communal because
you had to. But life was really, really hard.
Well, yeah,
you know,
but like
so
the good parts of communicating and sharing, which is we don't have a lot of. You know.
Yeah. I mean, when people are crawling around on the ground sharing dandelion leaves and hickory nuts, they're not talking about usually politics. They're usually kind of present and just trying to figure out what's the task at hand. So bring their focus to the present. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another good thing.
All right. Cool.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it.